Hello and welcome, I'm Rick the Pilot Teacher, and if you are thinking of becoming a helicopter pilot, you've got to train in a helicopter. Question is, which is the best one to do it in? So in this video we're going to kind of go over the 4 most common training helicopters. You've got the R-22, you've got the R-44, you've got the Schweizer, and you've got the Cabri G2. Which one's the best one? Each one has their pros and cons, so in this video we're going to look at which one is going to be the best aircraft for you to learn to fly helicopters. So all of these aircraft are fantastic aircraft. They are used all over the world every day and have trained tens of thousands of pilots throughout the decades. Now, the one that you want to fly in and you are budgeting for maybe kind of have to be changed after this video. It may be something that you've not thought of. So what I'm going to do is just going to go through each of these aircraft, find out which one is going to be perfect for you. So first one, Robinson R-22. This has been the training helicopter of choice for decades. It's a 2-seater, 2-bladed, piston engine with a carburetor. Because it's carbureted, it is prone to carburetor ice, but you learn to live with that. It's a very nimble, very agile helicopter. Some may say unstable. It teaches you how to fly. It teaches you how to get good hands and feet because it is very twitchy. Usually on average, it's going to take around about 10 hours for people to kind of start to get the hang of hovering. But it is a great, great training aircraft. Yes, there is a stigma behind the R-22s, and I know a lot of older pilots who have never even seen them are like, hell no, there's no way I would ever get an R-22. I've got over 1,000 hours in one. I love the machine, it's fantastic, but it's like any aircraft, you've got to fly it within its envelope of limitations. You go out there, yeah, and it does bite you. But as an aircraft, it's a fantastic training aircraft. It's nice and fast, you can easily cruise around 70 knots. If you get a bit of a lighter crew and a lighter fuel load, you can wind it up to 90, which is great when you're doing your cross-country flights. Especially solos, you can wind it up to 90 knots and just rip it, and it's great because then it reduces your hourly rental cost. It's 2 seats and it is quite a skinny cabin. It's only 44 inches wide, so if you have wide shoulders, wide hips, it can get real cozy. Like even with me, I'm only 5'6", and I'm rubbing shoulders with the people next to me. So it's quite tight. If you're tall, you kind of have to kind of get shoehorned into the cockpit, but it does work. The big issue with the R-22 from a student's point of view is it does have a maximum seat weight limitation of 240 pounds. So if you are over that, you cannot fly in the R-22. So if you budgeted for the R-22, you're over 240 pounds. Sorry, but you're out of luck. You've got to have to look at a different helicopter. So hourly rental costs for the R-22. Solo, it's going to be around about 280 bucks an hour. With an instructor, the dual rate roughly is around about 345. I've kind of tried to average it out over everything that I've found in the US at this time, 2022. It's around about 345 bucks per hour, give or take. So you're probably wondering, how much does it cost to do your private pilot certificate on an R-22? Well, FAA states the minimum is 40 hours. Forget that, not a chance. I've not even seen any student get close to 40 hours. The student average roughly is around about 60 hours, again, give or take. So 60 hours is kind of where I usually base a lot of my ballparks on. So, as part of the requirements, you've got to do a minimum of 10 hours solo. So your solo time is going to be 2,800 bucks. Your dual time, so 50 hours, is going to be around about 17,250, something like that. So total cost for an R-22 for a complete private pilot certificate at 60 hours is going to be just over 20 grand, which isn't too bad. But the main thing is you've got to consider is the seat weight limitation, and if you are especially broad-shouldered and wide in the hips, you might not physically fit in the R-22. But if you do, it's a great training aircraft. You'll have so much fun learning to fly in that because it is a challenge, especially when you're first starting out. Okay, the second helicopter on my list is the Schweizer, and it's either the 269 or the 300 depending on the model. This is a helicopter that's been around for decades, well the pedigree of it has, and I believe it was originally designed for the US Army to train all the pilots around Fort Rucker or wherever it was. Great training aircraft, and it's a lot wider cabin. It's about 52 inches. So depending on the model, some even have the 3 seats in there, so you can actually fit 3 people, which makes it greater for students that can't fit in the R22. Especially if you've got wide shoulders, wide hips. The other cool thing about the Schweizer is it doesn't have a maximum seat weight limitation. So providing you and the instructor stay within the limitations of the center of gravity, you can be whatever weight you are and fly in there. So I had a student that came to me when I was instructing way back when, and he was a super nice guy. He was a big guy. He was about 320 pounds, very broad-shouldered, and he planned on doing his training in the R22. And we got there, and he had no idea of how small the R22 was or the seat weight limitation. So we had to bump him over into the Schweizer. Not an issue. It was a little bit of a different hourly rate back then. It was a little bit more, so it cost him a little bit more. But we still managed to get him trained up, and he loved it in the Schweizer. So the Schweizer is basically, it's got 3 blades. It's a fully articulated rotor head. Depending on the model, it may be a carbureted piston engine or it may be a fuel injected piston engine. Fuel injection gets rid of the carby issues. But the main thing with the Schweizer is it is slow. That big glass bubble on the front is like trying to drive a bus through the air, and if you get a bit of a headwind, oh man, your ground speed can just really drop. I remember trying to do some IFR training. We were coming down at ILS at 60 knots indicated. I was looking at the GPS, we got 20 knots ground speed. We just had a headwind and it was horrible. We turned around and we were back to base in no time. So for cross countries, especially long cross countries, if you're going to be doing them in a Schweizer, try and pick them like kind of first thing in the morning when there's no wind, because if you get a headwind, oh, it's going to cost you. That thing is going to be so slow. But around the airport traffic patterns, it's a fantastic machine. It's very stable to hover. It's very docile, and it autos well. It is prone to ground resonance, so you have to be a bit careful with that. But they do have oleo struts on it, so it's kind of like it as you put it down, it gives it a nice bit of a cushion. It's a great aircraft, but it is a little bit slower when you're going point A to point B. So the cost of the Schweizer, again, it's around about 345 bucks an hour for dual that I've seen, and for solo, it's around about 280 bucks an hour. So the same price as an R22. They're not as common, so it might be a bit more difficult to find a flight school that's got one. If you're looking at going to a flight school that's near you and they don't have one and you can't fit in the R22, yeah, then you may have an issue. You may have to look elsewhere. But if you're over 240 pounds, the Schweizer is a great training helicopter. Okay, so helicopter number 3 is the Cabri G2 from Helicopters Guimbal. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's French, so if any of you that speak French, if I've just cannibalized that name, I apologize. But it's the new kid on the block. It's basically been designed by a former Eurocopter engineer, and as you look at it, you can definitely see the Eurocopter heritage in there. It's a 3-bladed, fully articulated rotor head. It's got a fenestron, tail rotor system on it. It's got composite main rotor blades. It's got a crash-resistant fuel tank. So it's got a lot of good safety features built into it, which is what you want in a training aircraft, because you know you're training. Mishaps do happen. So yeah, these things are all nice to have. It's a great training aircraft all round. It flies well in the pattern. It's nice and stable. It's actually got a cyclic in it, so it feels a bit more like a helicopter, unlike the Robinsons with their T-bar. It's a lot of space in it. It's, you know, it's not the biggest. It's not as wide as a Schweizer, but the cabin on it is 48 inches. So there's a bit more room than the R22. The other cool thing with the Cabri is that there is no seat weight limitation. So just like the Schweizer, providing you can keep it within the center of gravity limitations, you and your instructor are good all day. So another option if you are too heavy for the R22. The main problem with this one is it's hard to find. Because it's the new kid on the block, it is slowly working its way into the flight schools, but it's a brand new aircraft, so it's hard to find. If you can find one, it's a great option. The other cool thing with the G2 is the inside is very comfortable. You've got some digital display in there, so it's almost like a glass cockpit, which is nice. It gets you used to reading analog gauges and digital gauges. It's a piston engine, so it's carbureted too. So you do have to be wary of carb ice, but it's fast, you know, same as the R22. Doing cross countries, 80 knots all day long. Buzz around in the airport traffic pattern, no problem. Auto's like a dream. 3-bladed rotor system, so again, you've got to be wary of ground resonance, but it's a fantastic training helicopter if you can find it. Now, cost, yeah, it's a little bit more than the R22. On average, it's around about 350 bucks an hour, and around about, you know, the 270, 280 bucks an hour solo. So it's a tiny bit more if you're doing 60-hour private, comes out to about 20,200. But it's just hard to find. So if you are looking at which flight school to go to, if you're moving away from home, you know, try and look for a flight school that's got them. Speaking of which, if you are going to be doing your pilot training soon, go check out pilotteacher.com. I've been working for the last month just putting together an awesome course to help you guys save money on flight training. Now, it doesn't matter what aircraft you're flying, whether it's fixed wing, helicopter, if you're doing a recreational pilot certificate, private, or a full professional program. I've designed this kind of course so it's all in modules so you can pick out all the bits that are applicable to you, and it's all about how to save money in so many different areas of your flight training so that more people can get training in the helicopter, because the cheaper it is, the less money you have to borrow, the less you go into debt, and more people can get flying. So go check it out. When I release this, it might not be ready just yet. I'm just getting the finishing touches, put it to it. I want it to be perfect for you guys. So keep an eye out on pilotteacher.com, and if it's there, go over. I'm telling you now, this course will pay for itself 10 times over just in the savings that you'll make at flight school. And it's also going to teach you how to kind of select the right flight school to suit you personally. So the fourth helicopter on the list is the Robinson R44. This is basically the larger brother of the R22. This one's a 4-seat helicopter. It's newer than the R22. R22 was Frank Robinson's original. Then we did the R44. Now they've got the R66, which is the turbine. But the R44 is one of the most popular private helicopters because it's 4 seats. It's really comfortable. It's got lots of power, and you can just fly your whole family all day long in this. And it's a great, great helicopter. But I've noticed a lot in the past recent years that a lot of flight schools are trying to push students into doing all of their training in the R44, which is fine, but it's going to cost you so much more money because you're paying for basically an extra 2 seats and an extra 2 cylinders. It is a bigger helicopter, so the cabin is wider. It's 50 inches wide, so it's good if you've got broader shoulders. And they have upped the seat weight limitation to 300 pounds. So if you can't fit in the R22 and they don't have a Schweizer or a G2, you can go into the R44. But you've got to be careful with it because the hourly rate is a lot more. So for dual, it's going to be around about 515 bucks an hour. For solo, it's going to be 450 bucks an hour, roughly. So your cost to learn to fly in it is going to be a lot more. So, you know, a 60-hour private pilot certificate is going to be about 30 grand, 31 grand. So it's an extra 10 grand more just to do your private pilot certificate. And if you're doing all your training in it, oh, it's going to be so much more. And the flight schools are kind of, yeah, they're kind of being a bit sleazy with this. They're like, oh yeah, do all your training in the R44. More employers will look at you. You've been training in a much more better helicopter and you'll stand much better chance of getting a job if you've been doing all your training in the R44. And I'm like, no, I think that's BS. It's going to cost you a fortune to do it all in the R44. Whereas what I've always suggested is do your training in a cheaper helicopter. Then if you want to go onto an R44, just do 5-10 hours at the end just to get yourself used to it and get flying in that. Especially if you've been flying the R22. The R22 to the R44, they feel almost identical and it's not much of a jump at all. But doing all your training in R44, That's a lot of money. But the R-44 is a great helicopter, two-bladed rotor system. It's got a bit more of inertia in it, so there's less issues with the low rotor RPM stall there. And it's a lot faster. You can cruise at about 100 knots in this thing. A lot more fuel you can be taken, so you can do a lot more. But because of that, it's going to cost you more. So out of all the 4 helicopters, which one would I pick? If it was me and I was going to flight school tomorrow, my first pick would be the Cabri G2. The safety factors that it's got in there with the fenestron, the crash-resistant fuel cell, crash-attenuating seats, they are what I look for in a training aircraft. And because it's practically the same price as the R-22 and the Schweizer, it makes it a no-brainer. It's just a bit harder to find because it's not as popular. So Cabri G2 is my choice, but it depends on whatever you can find. So some of you may be asking, well, why not do training on a turbine helicopter? If the whole point is trying to get a job, everybody flies turbines now. And yeah, it's a valid issue. The only problem with turbines is you best have really deep pockets. I mean, really deep. So let's say you want to go and do all your training on a Jet Ranger. Let's just look at the private pilot certificate in a Jet Ranger. The dual rental cost for a Jet Ranger on average is around about $1,200 an hour. Solo is around about 11, 35, 40, something like that. So just to do 60 hours private pilot certificate on a Jet Ranger is going to be about $71,000. So 20 grand in a Schweizer R-22 or Cabri G2, or 70 grand in a jet box. That's a big change, and that's just for private. Imagine going all the way through for a professional pilot program. It's huge. So again, you don't need to do all your training in a Jet Ranger, an A-Star, EC-120, anything like that. Do your training in a cheaper 2-seater helicopter, and then if you want to, go and get your turbine. Some places call it an endorsement. It's not an endorsement. Most places call it a transition, but basically it's getting some time in a turbine. And this is what I did. I was up to about 1,000 hours in the R-22, and I wanted to go and get my turbine experience. So most people do 3, 5, 10 hours in a Jet Ranger, something like that, and then it stands you in a good situation to go to an employer because you've already got kind of some turbine experience. They don't have to put the training into you. So turbines are great. But you best have money is no issue, because yeah, 70 grand over 20, I know which one I would pick. So what about if you are wanting to buy your own aircraft, learn how to fly in that? So many people do that. If you're fortunate enough, congratulations. I wish I was in your position. Buying your own aircraft and learning to fly in it is a very popular option because it saves you a lot of money. You're not paying the high instructor and school rate. So let's take an R-44 for an example. You know, at the school with no instructor, the hourly rate is about $495. If you own it yourself, I think Robinson's put it out to around about $260, $280 an hour. So your cost is a lot less. So what you can do is you can go and hire an instructor to come to your house or to your hangar, wherever you keep your aircraft, and basically you're paying them, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 bucks an hour, and it's a lot cheaper. So the aircraft rental, well, the aircraft cost is about 260 bucks plus their cost of say 60 bucks. You know, you're up to just over 300 bucks an hour. So it is a lot cheaper. But the issue that I personally see with training in your own aircraft is, what if something goes wrong? Because incidents do happen in training. That's what happens. You know, you're learning to fly. Not all instructors can rescue an aircraft and stop it from getting an engine overspeed or a rotor overspeed or a little bit of a hard landing and you spray the skids a little bit. Do you really want to take the risk if you've just spent $500,000 on your new aircraft? I wouldn't. So if it was me and I was just bought an R-44, I would go and use the flight school's aircraft. Any issues? You have an engine overspeed, you've got to have an engine overhauled. That's a big expense, and I would rather pay an hourly rate and have the flight school cover that cost than to have it on my own aircraft. So I would go and do, so let's say I want to learn to fly, to be able to fly my family around. Go and do your private pilot certificate in R44 at a flight school. Yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit more, but then when you've got your private pilot certificate, your nice shiny aircraft is still brand new and you're not going to be having any of the training issues or training stresses placed into that airframe. The other thing you have to be careful of too is your insurance will probably get cranked if you're using your own aircraft to train in. Insurance companies know incidents happen. So yeah, you have to make sure that you inform your insurance company that you're going to be using it for training and be prepared for the insurance rates to go through the roof. So me, I would use the flight school, and then when I know what I'm doing, go fly my own aircraft. So what about kit helicopters? Kit helicopters are pretty popular because of their cost. They can be a lot cheaper than an R22, Schweizer, R44, Cabri G2, Jet Ranger, whatever. And kits are a great idea. There's kind of few issues with kits. One is majority of the kits are all single-seater. And I can tell you now, if you've never flown a helicopter and you try and pick a helicopter up into the hover, no matter how much time you got in flight sim, that thing is going upside down. It takes on average about 10 hours for most students to kind of get the grasp of hovering, and you go try and do that by yourself, your helicopter's going to end up in a wreck and hopefully you don't get hurt. There are some kits that are two-seater, and that is great because you can get the kit. You've then just got to try and find an instructor that either has the experience or the willingness to come into the helicopter that you built and teach you how to fly in your aircraft. Not something I would do. I don't know if I've got the trust in somebody else's mechanical ability that's not in the factory to put their aircraft together, strap my butt into it, and then go throw it at the ground, teaching them how to fly. Maybe if it was mine and I knew how it was built, I could go teach them in mine if it's the same aircraft. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. But trying to find an instructor for the kit that you've built can be very difficult because it's a very small community, very limited number of people that fly them and instructing them. One of the options that most people do that I've seen that go into kits is they will go and learn in something like R22 Schweizer, get the necessary experience to gain their pilot certificate, and then go and fly in their single seat. That works out a lot better, but the cost of training is still going to be a lot more because you're having to pay for that second seat next to you. So again, kit helicopters, you find an instructor can be anywhere from 50 to 100 bucks per flight hour, but you've got to try and find one that lives near you. Otherwise, you've got to go to them, and yeah, it's just hard. But kit helicopters, they're great if that's what you're into, but definitely do not go and try and lift up in a single seat helicopter without any training. It will end badly, I can assure you. So if I'm looking at flight school, I'm going to be looking for a Cabri G2. Second, I'm going to be looking for a Robinson R22, then a Schweizer, then an R44. We've gone through the pros and cons of why. Turbines, yeah, don't even bother. Get your pilot certificate out of the way, then do some additional training onto a turbine. They're stupid expensive, and yeah, there's no need to go and spend all that money just to have turbine hours or R44 hours for a job, because everything that I've seen, unless there's two guys or girls sitting right next to one another, this person's got 200 hours in an R44, this person's got 200 hours in an R22, and then 10 hours in an R44. Yeah, probably the person that's got all their training in the R44 is going to get the job, but they're going to be paying off so much more in terms of their cost to learn how to fly. So yeah, just do your training in the cheaper aircraft, and then if you want to transition onto something that's a helicopter that's going to work for you personally, whether it's your own aircraft or if you want to get into a career. But all 4 of those aircraft are fantastic machines to learn to fly in. It's all going to depend on your personal situation and the availability of those aircraft. But no matter which one you pick, you are going to be sweating bullets for your first 10 hours of your training, and it's fun. I'm telling you now, I love teaching people how to hover. It feels like hell on earth, but at the same time, it's one heck of a challenge. So if you've not got into a helicopter yet, go take a trial lesson. Go check out pilotteacher.com for the tips on saving money at flight school. Get yourself in a helicopter and go and have some of the best times of your life. I'll see you next time.